So in terms of the social science section, the reason that the SLC gave us the funding was really because there was a recognition that post-focus on the natural sciences, there was increasing demand from parliamentarians for the social science evidence base alongside the natural science. And we could benefit parliamentarians in doing their work if we could enhance their capacity to access this kind of evidence. So one of our key aims is to integrate social science evidence into all the work that Post does. So we work very closely with the other sections and with the fellows in the other sections to make sure if they're looking at areas around energy use and behaviour change, that we're very much helping point them to what bodies and PPA might need to go and talk to within the social sciences. But we're also developing a substantive stream of social science notes. So these might have a basis in science and technology, and frequently will, but there will also be issues where there's a strong social science evidence base, but they're not directly connected to science and technology. So these could be areas around crime or welfare or so as part of this, we're going through an intensive process at the moment of building up our kind of connections with the external organisations and academics, because while Post has very strong networks within the natural science community, because social science hasn't officially been a part of the remit until now, we need to build that up. The second one is to provide support to other parts of Parliament dealing with research evidence and to help to facilitate academic engagement. So I helped out Mark on one of their recent inquiries to do a background briefing on what the social science research evidence was, but whether or not car traffic would continue to increase in the coming future. And then a key thing which is likely to interest everyone is that we're working with Parliament's information and outreach team to host an internal workshop in the next couple of weeks, bringing together people working in all the different sections of Parliament to look at how they use academic research in their day-to-day jobs and how they source it when they're looking for it, and to get some reflection going in terms of how they might be able to use academic research more effectively to increase their capability to do their work. Once we've got kind of outcomes agreed across all the different departments, we're going to host a conference early next year, really bringing in academics and representatives of academia, policy wings, things like that, to really bring those messages back out and see what you need from us in order to use your time to engage with the work that we do. So some of the things I've had back already is that in an unpublished 4-page briefing, we have 3 pages of references of academic work that we've used within our literature review. But because we're looking to produce a processing briefing, we don't publish that in a hard copy. But given the increasing shift to electronic communications, we can hyperlink, we can have a version online that lists all the research we've reviewed, which obviously is a benefit to academics when they're looking to demonstrate their impact. The last one is to run a programme of activity to evaluate the use of research evidence within parliamentary debate and scrutiny more broadly. So we're really interested in the work that Ross and his colleagues are doing with what work centres, because obviously there's a big connection in terms of their approach of enhancing capability within government and our interest in enhancing it within Parliament. But purely because of capacity, we're not prioritising that until February when the second advisor joins us. But I'm very happy to talk about that in more detail afterwards if anyone's got any questions. So the ways that you can specifically get involved are to inform our upcoming work agenda. So similar to Mark, our board meets once a quarter. If there's areas that you're working in or that you know is going on within your department that you think are likely to be of interest, then just get in touch. All of our details are online. Let us know and we can scope it up and put it to the board for them to reflect and discuss on. You can also get involved in post notes, both as interviewees and external peer reviewers, and again participate in events as speakers. So all of our upcoming work programme is on our website. You can join the mailing list and get an alert every time the board's met and include a new topic if it's a topic that you're working in. Again, please do just get in touch and you can be involved in the process. And if you don't want to be proactive, I mean things like if you maintain clear details and research interests on your websites or within a departmental website, it makes it much easier for us when we're researching the work to find you. And the last one is just to encourage you to come along when we do have a conference next year, or to send someone along in your place so you can be involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We will go onward to Naomi.
Hi, I'm one of the students from the LSE GB314 class, and we've produced a paper called Scholars on Air, British Academics in the Broadcast Media. And today I'm going to present or explain just a small aspect of our findings, which concentrate on what explains the number of media appearances an academic has made. Our study, like the research we did, was based on us both surveying academics and interviewing those who are working in the broadcast media. So we talked to people who were working as producers of both TV and radio shows, and also those who were working researching academics for them. And we conducted 2 surveys, both in 2013. One was sent to what we call media experts, people who are making frequent appearances on the broadcast media. And another one was sent to members of the Political Studies Association, regardless of whether or not they'd made media appearances. So Table 1 demonstrates the frequency that the 598 respondents to our survey to political scientists in general, how many appearances they made on the media. And as you can see, more than half of the academics surveyed made either no national or no local broadcast media appearances, but about a fifth made more than 2 appearances. So we basically sought to understand what caused this distinction. And we found a number of factors that were relevant, some of which academics have basically no control over, and some of which they have an awful lot of control over. So firstly, I'm going to look at the influences that academics can't really control. So this is Table 2A, and Table 2B will follow just shortly. And it shows that quite clearly the number of media appearances varies depending on what subdiscipline an academic works in. So it's in descending order. So at the top we can see those who specialise in the Middle East had, more than half of those had more than 2 appearances. But that drops down to just 80% of people when we get down to people who specialise in the teaching of politics. And we've judged this to be more likely to be a reflection of the number of, not a reflection of the number of academics in each subdiscipline, but to be more likely to be a reflection of media demand for academics to talk on these topics. So that's not necessarily something that academics can help. And something else that you probably wouldn't be able to help, or not reasonably, is the region that you're in. So we might instinctively think that London is the hub of all media activity, but intriguingly, those living in Wales have the edge. And London scores quite averagely, so that's something that you maybe don't have much control over. But I think the most relevant or interesting part of our research is actually that which concentrates on the things that academics can actively do. So our research with those in the broadcast media. Our research with those in the broadcast media saw us talking to people who were doing the research for programmes, and particularly on smaller programmes, and when they didn't have an obvious choice of academic they were familiar with, the tool that they were using to find a suitable candidate was Google. So basically all of the factors mentioned, the one that came up most frequently was that they looked for academics who blogged. And this anecdotal evidence is actually substantiated by our survey. So we found that 53% of academics have blogged, and those who have are more likely to appear in the media frequently than those that don't. So 36% of academics who blogged had made frequent media appearances versus 15% of academics who hadn't blogged. And it was slightly less impressive figures, but you're also more likely to be making frequent media appearances if you were tweeting. As a slight aside, it's interesting to know that we found no evidence of a trade-off between your productivity in what you were publishing and appearing in the media, so it might seem like it might take up quite a bit of your time, but actually those who had published 3 or more times in the past 2 years were more likely to have appeared on the broadcast media more than 2 times. They were likely to have appeared, 27% of those who appeared more than twice, compared to just 7% who hadn't published 3 or more pieces. So we move on to multiple regression. We can see that blogging is the factor that is the most important here, followed by subdiscipline and region and level of research activity, and also your age. So people were tending to be a bit older who were making frequent media appearances. Oh, and as a final note, whilst you might hope that appearing on the media was an opportunity to showcase your own research, unfortunately, this is not really the case. So, as Table 4 demonstrates, talking about matters relating to your expertise is much more likely. Only 28% of academics were talking about their own research, and when it came to social scientists, unfortunately, that figure dropped to 16%. So, our research demonstrates that academics can really significantly increase their chances of making frequent media appearances by making sure that those who are working in the media have easy access to their work via blogging predominantly. But if you were hoping this was a way to showcase your own research, then you might be a little disappointed.
Many thanks for that. There's a bit of a plug for the PSA blog there. I think so. Get blogging away, and you will get noticed in the media. You know, fantastic case studies next time around. Can I, before we go into discussion, can I ask our heads of departments, partly in relation to what we've heard from Naomi, but also from the whole panel, whether you include impact-related activity when you think about workload allocation for your colleagues? Anybody do that?
Yeah. Just unpack on that point, Charlie. We don't include it. We definitely include it in performance development review at the end of the year, so we take into account media engagement and this kind of thing, which obviously we welcome, but we don't can't include it as a target, if you see what I mean, because you can't say, well, you must appear in the Times 6 times in the next 9 months. But yes, definitely. Very important.
Good. Okay. Then over to you for questions for our team of panelists to set out various opportunities and some analysis of impact-related activity. Who will be first? Me.
Matt Leach, University of Hull. There's a question to Mark. Thank you very much. I found that very helpful. For I think some of my colleagues, the issue is not that they're not encouraged to submit written evidence to Commons or Lords select committees and the inquiries that they are undertaking. I think they do that, and they do that very well. Obviously, I'm not talking about Philip Norton, who's often on the other side of that. I'm talking about the rest of us. Philip's dimension is obviously different and very beneficial for us. But the thing that I wanted to ask was, and you might not be able to answer this, is about oral evidence versus written evidence. It seems to me, as someone who's submitted written evidence and had it published online, that is far easier, but getting invited to give oral evidence and the potential spin-off and PR benefits we can have, that can bring for us in terms of our department, our marketing, how we flag that up on our open days, and what have you. I think I would like some information about that. Is it just be assertive, be persistent, or is there something else?
Well, it is very easy to submit written evidence. It's quite hard to get it rejected in a sense. So it's
Thanks very much. It's not worth commenting on colleagues' work.
I think, inevitably, there is, to give an example, if we have 2 evidence sessions in an inquiry, we pack witnesses in, to be fair. We have 3 panels on each session. So you might be looking in total at 12, 13, 15 at most individuals or organisations that appear to give oral evidence. And we might have received 50, 60, 100 written submissions. So there is a problem there straight away.
Right.
I think with any subject, there is usually a list of the usual suspects that we need to hear from. So if we've done cycling this week, which hasn't entirely gone to plan at times, but there are cycling organisations, there are road hauliers, there are local authorities, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You can't have an inquiry into a subject without hearing from the people who, you might be in the recommendations at or appear to be the central issue. Academics are, I suppose, rarely in that category. They offer an informed perspective, and sometimes I think some committees overlook that. I think sometimes the material we get, from a personal perspective, I think sometimes the material we get from academics isn't presented in the best way, so it's quite hard to get into it. It's not that it's not useful when you finally sort of get down to the second page where the narrative really starts. But it can be a little bit inaccessible and a bit dense, and that kind of turns off the chair, for example, who might be looking at the stuff, or the clerk who might be listening to a lot of different stuff. So I think actually presenting your written evidence better, so that the first sort of box on the front page gives a very clear indication of where you're coming from and why your point is important, can make a big difference, because a lot of members won't read much of the written evidence. The oral evidence is key because it's what they will hear and it's what will be most influential. And from my point of view, I want to make sure that people given evidence, I want to give them a show. They're going to have interesting things to say. They're not going to sort of they're not going to come out with banalities, or they're not going to qualify things to such an extent that there isn't a central point, or that they're going to get lost in the wider discussion. So I think, persistence does pay to some extent. If someone's on the phone asking you, well, can you please give oral evidence, you're sort of obliged to tell the committee, and quite often they will just say, oh, go on with that. but often it won't be always possible, just because of the as I said, you can't have everybody, it just isn't possible. So
Thank you very much.
Did you want to come in directly on that?
I just did, because the PSA was asked to give evidence on open access to the Biz Select Committee, and I think in that case it was because, one, we actually lobbied that committee quite hard to hold an inquiry. We got in touch with all of the members of the committee, we spoke to the clerk on the committee. Then, of course, we already developed a relationship with the clerk over that period when she was actually collecting a lot of information to put in front of the committee. So even though loads of learned societies submitted evidence, I think it was a huge number, because we had a relationship beforehand that we were actually asked to give evidence, the oral evidence.
Thank you very much. You were next.
I thought to Mark and Ross, which I'd like you to expand on a little bit. And what I hear is a slight, thought about it from Brunel University. A slight yellow alert goes off in my head here, and it reminds me of something I do when I teach our program in intelligence. And that is, Mark, you give us a kind of breakdown of what you want the paper to look like, which is what I call key judgment, body text, and evidence annex. That's a JIC paper. Is one of the messages that one of the things we need to do as a profession is to develop a competency in civil service style drafting skills, as well as the traditional discursive drafting practice of academic writing? Do we need to up our game in a new area?
We've got a speaker on that page. Ross.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, actually. The comment I was going to build upon Mark's point is that we like detail. Detail is very good, very relevant, and we like analysis, and we like in-depth analysis and discursive analysis as well. But what we need is, and actually that's something that really helps support the summary, because often what you have a very good summary, and the point that you're interested in, you then flick into the report to find the details. I think what I really caution is, this is not about a dilution of quality, it's not about dilution of rigor, it's fundamentally just an issue of presentation, I think. And also, I think for you, it's a wide progression in terms of not just yourselves, but academics. It's about presenting the same information but in a variety of different ways to different audiences, and that's entirely appropriate. And so it's trying to learn how to do that. So.
I would echo that. I think you are writing for two different audiences. You're writing for the members of the committee who are busy people who are not necessarily going to get through page 1 and page 6. And they need to know, what's your point, what's your key point, what do you want done? That's the kind of question they want to know. And then there is, obviously there are people out there in the wider world who want to read your stuff, and your credibility depends on that. But there's also the committee staff and the advisors we've got, which will want to plough through the detail and try and really understand what the qualifications are to the broad statement at the top. So I wouldn't say it's about writing in changing the whole way in which you start, certainly not about dilution of quality, etc. So it's about
drafting skills.
It's about making sure that you're thinking about your audience when you write, and maybe it's that the audience changes as you switch from the first page to the second.
Can I add on one brief point to that, just quickly, so I don't forget it? Is civil servants struggle with this as well, that we all have different ministers and different preferences of style in terms of doing this. So we are constantly adapting. So to an extent, it's not a science, it's an art. And we struggle with it as much as people externally as well. So it's just, I want to be honest there in terms of this is not just a problem the people on the outside face, we also experience on the inside.
I think there's definitely room for a mixed landscape there. So I mean, the work that we use is by and large traditional academic articles, and we're very familiar with them and very happy with them. And we see our role as that of the intermediary of writing it in a way that's accessible for parliamentarians. But I think, with Marx it's very different because you're directly writing to members of Parliament, so how you need to present it will be quite different. But I think, where universities have kind of put time into or funding bodies or learning society professional bodies into writing kind of short synopsises on their website or circulating newsletters in terms of the kinds of research that are going on within their discipline or institution that are likely to have policy relevance in a policy relevant way, that's very helpful. So that's kind of an additional thing to the traditional academic landscape.
Possibly the blog as well, so an initial access point.
Yeah, I wanted to, Jonathan Davis to Montfort. I wanted to ask Naomi whether you picked up anything about sort of academic attitudes towards engagement with the broadcast media, and particular sort of reasons for resisting it, such as, I don't know, it's not relevant for me, I don't like it, it could be harmful, blah blah blah, these sorts of issues.
I can't remember exact figures and things, right? But basically, we did ask academics what they thought. We both asked them if they'd sought to initiate contact with broadcast media and also their motivations for doing that. In general, it seemed to be quite positive. So, the media very rarely paid even so much of expenses out to academics who came down to participate. And a lot of it was London-based. But in general, academics seem to be quite positive about participation with the media. They seem to think it was a good way to disseminate your research, and also that that refusing to engage with a wider audience somewhat defeated the point of producing their work. So it was quite positive.
Who's next? Please.
Just to comment on that, I think the climate has changed dramatically in my experience 30 years or so ago. A lot of academics either looked down on people who did the media as sort of somehow not serious scholars, or they wanted to do it for the money. It was actually an income supplement. The people at the LSE, where I was, used to go across to the World Service, and you didn't get much for a 5-minute slot, but it built up over a month. but now the environment is competitive because managements in the universities are pressurising academics to get out there and sell our product. And it brings me to your point, if I may, in the sense that there's a slight tension, isn't there, between the need for brevity, headlines and all the rest of it, and evidence. If it's detail confined to an appendix, you want evidence-based decision making. But if you haven't got time to look at the evidence, you've got to take something on trust. So who are the key entrepreneurs that you then trust?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because that's difficulty in evidence, right? In terms of who are the kind of people that you trust, who are the guardians of the knowledge. In health, that's the whole basis of academic peer review, is it not? That you base the trust in the published evidence that's been peer reviewed and scrutinised by a community of experts, and so it gives it that rigour there.
Academic life's about debate, there's a difference.
But then there'll be people who disagree.
Paul Carmichael.
Yeah, really just to follow up, Paul Carmichael, Ulster, on the PSA, but just to follow up the last point, to what extent is there this tension between brevity and perhaps more comprehensive answers to provide the evidence? Is there a tension in the committee or in the government circles itself between evidence on the one hand and frankly raw political prejudice on the other? Because as well as evidence-based policy, of course, there's often evidence-blind policy, and some messages are pretty crystal clear, but those with capacity to make decisions simply don't want to hear them. So that was one point. And then another on a very practical issue about the fellowships, if I may. I noticed it links in with the SRC. Could you say how, if at all, it affects, how it's affected by devolution and the arrangements in the devolved territories? Because I fear that more 900 may be excluded from being able to apply because of our relationship with the SRC and devolved HE budgets and so forth.
Right, there's a specific one there, I think, for you, Abbi, and then I think one of a more general reflection on the other points about policy-based evidence making.
I'm looking to film for the guidance, so I really don't know, but I can certainly find out and get back to you.
That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, there is an issue about, obviously, about Northern Ireland not having GSRC directly funded studentships.
Yeah, if you contact me.
Phil Subin, Director of Policy Communications Resources or something like that, at ESRC, who will be speaking a bit later. This question about evidence blind policy, what can we do about that?
Well, I think up front, we live in a democracy. We elect people, and they are elected. They have to make decisions. That's why we elect them. That's the democratic settlement we have. And within that, there will be times which those people who we elect make decisions which we don't like and are not evidence-based. And that's not great, but I think we just have to reflect, and that's the world in which we live. And I often draw upon the comment that Jeff Mulgan and Nesta made, which is that what we really want to do is fine if a minister or a politician is ignoring the evidence. It's better that they're at least looking at the evidence and actively ignoring it than being ignorant of the evidence. And I think we need to move towards a more evidence-based culture there. But what I would say is that sometimes, particularly in the civil service, that argument about the evidence ignorance and the ideology can sometimes become a red herring and an unwelcome debate in terms of using evidence, because government spends a whole range of money on things, and if we just focus on the 5% of decisions that are not evidence-based rather than the 95% that can be, that's where we can make more impact. And so there are things with a minister, you're just never going to persuade them. That is their view. But if we can try and encourage them in a whole range of other areas to be evidence-based, then that's a more effective strategy.
You're trying to get certain ministers to respond to evidence, and sometimes failing, or often failing.
I had a letter the other day, an email from somebody who said they were fed up with the debate about high-speed rail. It wasn't right that politicians with their various views were taking this decision. The issue should be given to experts to study for a few years, and then they could then decide we can get on with it. And at the same time, we were about to take evidence from KPMG, who produced a highly contentious report of evidence of the regional economic benefits of high-speed rail, which would come up with a figure, £15 billion by 2037 per year, which would be the benefits of the UK economy, disaggregated by local authority districts, amazingly, which had been panned by various other academics, and quite clearly even the experts were not even close to having a consensus view on the subject. So I'm always slightly wary of the phrase evidence-based policy making, because I think it's very difficult to get the evidence that everybody can agree on quite often. And absolutely, prejudice is a big part of policy making. You might call it prejudice, others call it conviction. And I, in the distant past, have been in the situation of a chair of a select committee looking at a draft report saying, I don't like that research, get me new research that backs up my point of view. What I would say is that evidence changes the nature of the debate. It shapes the debate. Just to take the high-speed rail example, the debate now in that particular area is about the extent to which there is going to be regional economic benefit from high-speed rail, where it might fall, and what else you might have to do to generate it, whether just building the line creates it or whether there's something else that you have to do. There isn't really a debate around the extent that there will be some benefits if you do the right sorts of things. It's about those other questions. And I think in lots of other areas, if you can get well-established evidence, I mean, high-speed rail is a fairly good example for us because we've done quite a lot of work on this. And one of the debates is about whether you need extra capacity on the West Coast Main Line. Sorry to bore you about this, but I'm my head. And we actually commissioned our specialists to do some work on this, and they painstakingly went through how many extra seats per day you would get if you extended platforms, extended trains, and did this and that and the other, which was the alternative proposal to high-speed rail, and compared that with just having new lines and new trains on it. And that's established that the high-speed rail line would give you a lot more seats, and undeniably a lot more seats. And that's never been contested. Now, whether you need that many more seats, whether those more seats are a good value for money is still a live debate. But I think the evidence moves the debate on. And I think that's the value of good evidence in any policy debate. But it doesn't, in my view, replace decision-making by politicians who may well look at the evidence with completely different glasses on. And that might be very frustrating from the point of view of the academic community or people who produce the evidence. But that's politics. And just to, sorry if I can hold the microphone for a second, the previous point that was made about, I can't remember what it was now, I'll come back.
If I might, I think it's also worth recognising that the MPs are very busy. I mean, if you think about all the work that goes on in their constituencies as well as within Westminster, that as well as it being about kind of personal connection or whatever, it's also about formal mechanisms of access to research evidence and analysis. So I think the kind of the shift in time for us having a social science section at Post and for working across with colleagues around what work centres, it's a really exciting opportunity for social scientists to demonstrate that actually their work is relevant and can inform the debate and shape it in meaningful ways that isn't kind of getting rid of the need for a democracy in the way that our political society is structured, but just to inform and shape that in a constructive way. So I think it's certainly worth not feeling alienated or kind of giving up with the process, but actually seeing this as an opportunity to engage in a new way.
And an observation I'd add on to that is that just speaking to MPs informally, one of the most powerful ways to get influence in MP is through the postbag. That's often what I focus in that, in terms of the information that comes through their office directly to them. It can be quite an influential way. And also, it's just them to really underline the importance of you as a community of academics is crucial in challenging policy, in stimulating the debate, in challenging the status quo. And that's why it's so important that universities are independent and free thinking, because it does really challenge the status quo and generates new knowledge. If we had answers to all these questions, it'd be fine, but we don't live in a technocratic world. It's difficult. We need to keep